I feel like a part of going through this journey is mentioning a lot of the trauma that I experienced growing up. This is going to come up, I'm sure, during my appointment with my therapist, so I feel like I need to at least begin this way. When I was growing up, my dad would regularly tell me that I'm a loser and I'll never amount to anything. Turns out that became self-fulfilling, and every time that I would fail, I would hear exactly that. I've heard it so many times that I never got it out of my head, so even now, when I do something poorly or I disappoint, I hear it again. He would constantly yell at Mom, and when that happened, I would just shut down in my room, playing video games and try to ignore it, but I couldn't. That's something that, even now, when somebody raises their voice, I tend to shut down, which is one of the biggest reasons why I don't raise my voice. When I had an important event, like a concert at school for instance, he would regularly miss the events to go play chess with his brother. And he wouldn't really care about how I did in said event either. He didn't know how to show love, so instead he would use money. And for a messed up reason, it would work temporarily, but it never undid the abuse that I experienced. Before I went to school, I realized that I had a fine motor disability, making my handwriting awful. In elementary school, I was put in a disability building while they tried to help me with that. It didn't work, but it made the bullying that I experienced even worse. Eventually, I believed that I was disabled, and I was taking Ritalin. With my already chaotic brain, it certainly didn't help matters at all. Some of the students I went to school with also went to church with me, so I would try to hide from them, but it looked like we were playing hide and seek or something, so I would hear the old people disapprove of what I was doing. I heard more of that than I let on, and even more after services. Aside from physical bullying, there was teasing as well. It started innocently enough. However, add that to what I was taking at home, it was multiplied. The bullies got the reaction they wanted in verbally harassing me, so of course it got worse and worse, and the teachers typically didn't do much of anything about it. The junior high was much worse. From the typical childhood bullying and occasionally getting in fights, to a more ghetto environment where I obviously didn't fit in, on top of choosing choir, orchestra, and journalism as my electives. I'll give you an example. In orchestra, the instrument my mom spent lots of money on was regularly hidden from me, and eventually someone destroyed it even. That kind of behavior was normal for me to experience. Eventually, I just stopped caring about everything. My grades dropped, proving that my dad was right again. But I was so enveloped in my video games that I pretended that everything was fine. Most people at school didn't even bother noticing, as if they cared. My parents got divorced in the 11th grade, which got me out of that bad situation, but I was put in another. Terrible things were said about Mom during the case, and to celebrate my dad winning the divorce, he took me out for pizza. That kind of behavior was typical for him. The school I went to when visiting Dad was much better than the one I went to in Fort Smith. However, with everything else going on around me, I didn't get to enjoy it. I had a concert in the school I spent a semester in, and although Dad lived locally, he wasn't there. Mom was, however. That concert was different from the ones I was used to. I was in the show choir and dressed up with the nicest clothes I had for the concert, but they still didn't let me on stage because I didn't dress the part, so I got to watch it from behind the curtains. When I would make All Region or the choral festival, only Mom would show up for that as well, but I was so broken by that point that I stopped caring. In the 12th grade, I had to take a PE credit to graduate. Some of the sports played were shirts versus skins, which, considering how I already felt about myself by that point, didn't go so well. Cue mockery. So, add hating how I look to the rest of issues I've been dealing with. After I barely graduated, not that I cared, the only place that would hire me was a minimum wage fast food job. Even though I didn't like it, I worked there for 8 years because it's all I deserved. During that time, I actually dated somebody, but that individual didn't show affection towards me, and somehow that didn't bother me. Eventually, she would break up with me in fourth person. Turns out she heard all kinds of negative things about me from the other people working there, and I didn't seriously date anybody since that I can recall. From there, I moved to a job that made me feel like just another cog in a machine. 4 years I worked there, and I would hear on the phone that it's my fault that my kids and I are losing our house, and also, why is my credit card not working? From the actual employees there, I was told that I'm not on the list for promotions, but I just went through the motions anyway. Switching gears here, while I did work there, and with me in a state that I've been in all my life, we actually had a younger group of people that attended a church. I wanted to fit in with them, but I never felt like hanging out with them, and when I did, they would pull pranks on me. It was lighthearted pranks, but for me it was like high school all over again. Eventually, I would have a near-death experience. I honestly would have been fine not waking up, but I did. I've been having them ever since when I would overexert myself. What tends to help would be wearing clothing that's more open and cool. But since I hate how I look, I tend to stay indoors, not doing too much strenuous. Primarily that's because I wouldn't want to subject anyone to seeing me. A few years ago, my dad died. I was there watching him breathe his last, but it didn't affect me. I was the rock for everyone else and returned to work a few days later as if nothing was wrong. I honestly don't think I miss him all that much, but I went because I was supposed to. I'm sure there are several other cases that I can't bring to my mind right now, but opening up like this was something that I needed to do.